Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, episode 64.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.
Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards. Today's episode, Dr. Kreischow and I started a conversation about handling objections, specifically at day 2, and in addressing the mindset that's necessary to handle objections, we really dug into this idea of drawing a line in the sand. And I would say most of the podcast revolved around that. So I think one of the most important pieces is not just the tactic or the framework of how to handle objections, but where you need to be mentally in order to maximize your ability to do that. And I think above all, this concept of drawing a line in the sand and where that line is beats everything else that you'll need to know. So I think you're really going to enjoy today's episode. One of the things that if you want more of that type of content, if you actually want to know the types of closes that we would recommend, how to do them, how to handle very specific objections, then check out the Chiropractic Sales Playbook. I think you'll really enjoy that. It's 12 modules, tons of content, and it really is the best of the best when it comes to the sales process in chiropractic. So enjoy today's episode of Life by Design for Chiropractors.
Kreischow, welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors.
Happy to be here, pal. It feels like it's been a while.
I go back and forth, right? Cycling in different docs from Life by Design, whether it's you or Mike, or sometimes we have a guest. So it's always good to have you back on the show. I enjoy these podcasts. And, you know, as this started even, I guess, a year and a half ago, maybe more, actually, for people who go back and listen to some of those first episodes, I think it's been a huge success, and we're excited about the feedback, whether it be individual verbal feedback that people give us or coffee cups from Starbucks that they send us. Hint, hint.
Oh, yeah.
Either way, it really is, or other test products that you really want us to test out. That's fine, too. Either way, it's been a lot of fun to do it, and it's fun to do it with you and Mike and everybody else who's listening.
Yeah, I totally agree. Love the coffee-related gifts. Can't lie about that either. I'm sure Mike does as well.
Well, he puts his tea in there, I'm sure. Yeah. Maybe his protein shakes in the coffee mug, just feel like he's part of the team. And, you know, as a little side note, I was just thinking, and this is probably something we should talk about on the podcast in the future, as this is a business-related podcast. You know, we're just on the verge of opening Charlie's Cafe, and although that might not seem like it's chiropractic, and it's not, it is part of the Life by Design Center, and I'm excited about that endeavor, and I think there'll be lots of lessons that I'm going to be able to share with listeners as we go through opening a restaurant cafe, you know, delving into a different market, even though we've built a market here in our facility and here in our town and community, so we're going to leverage that market. But it's a whole other world. We've been visiting coffee shops, cafes, working on the branding, working on the infrastructure designs, flow, systems, all the things that we actually did for our chiropractic practice, for our fit club, and things we do for clients. It's funny now I'm repeating all those with Charlie's Cafe. So honestly, you know, as it spins back to coffee here, I'm pretty stoked to see Charlie's Cafe open and put the cherry on top of the Life by Design Center.
Yeah, congratulations, buddy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun, especially when docs come down to training camp. We'll have instead of making the espressos in the back room here at the office, we'll have a legit place to go sit and have coffee and do some of our training. So exciting stuff, Kreischow.
Totally, dude. You've never been, listen, man, I've known you for a long time. You're always doing something, you know. Awesome. It's a good quality.
Yeah, there's never a dull moment, and I like that. So today we're talking about handling objections, and, you know, this could go in a lot of different areas, and as I was prepping for the podcast, I have tons of notes in front of me, and you're trying to decide what is going to be of most value to our clients listening in and our listeners. And, you know, as I got off an actual coaching call this morning, and I went through some of the more detailed pieces of this, some of the frameworks and some of the communication strategies, and handling some individual objections that come up on, say, a day 2, or even further down, whether it be a table side or through your workshops, orientations, and so on. But I started to look for a central theme that was sitting in here, because I think that's something in the podcast we can do an even better job of getting right into the nitty-gritty and getting extremely granular on some of the really deeper concepts that would set people up to get something out of, say, frameworks and training and things like that. So today I want to talk about this idea drawing a line in the sand. And let me talk about the opposite, because I think a lot of times, creation, the profession, drawing a line in the sand for most people means I'm never going to accept anybody unless they start for a year of care, unless they prepay up front, unless they bring their spouse, unless they refer, 7 couples before the end of their first week. There's all these, restrictions and possible disqualifiers. Now, that said, if that's your line in the sand, I guess that is a line in the sand. But what I'm suggesting is when I say the words line in the sand, that doesn't have to be your line in the sand. So the concept for today is, how do you know where that line is? What's the point of having this line in the sand? And how does that tie back to handling objections? So, Gracia, when you think about drawing a line in the sand, I know we both have a history with this. And where did it come in your progression? Where was there a point when you said, enough is enough, I'm going to draw a line and this is what it is? And has that changed over your career?
Oh boy, what a question. I love your preamble about, the spouse and 7 families. And again, that's all, going back to this really big central idea of us always depending, and by us, I mean chiropractors, always depending on somebody else's opinion. That's something that's just been passed down generationally. Well, I didn't let this person start until, and we somehow accepted this as true. But to answer your question, I've drawn many. There's been many times there's been a line in the sand around fees where somebody, I won't even tell you how measly I was pretty much handing them money every time they were coming in to see me.
Yeah, you had my fee system show.
Exactly. And then when I went to their house, their child wasn't feeling well, and they wanted me to come over to their house and to check the baby. And of course I was going to go because I love doing that. And when I found out where they lived and what they had parked in the garage and what their house looked like, I felt it was just that it was just a gross feeling. And I knew that was a day where, and I don't discount. There's 0 discounts because of that, because that's my line in the sand. So again, I know where we're going with this, Jamie. I think the most important thing when it comes to drawing a line in the sand, it's multiple things. You have to know your personality. You have to know what you're comfortable with, and you need to drop garbage like fake it till you make it, and all these cliche quotes that, somehow, not to say that your line isn't going to change as you continue in practice, but you need to know, you need to be confident on you first before you start even thinking about what the lines are.
Yeah, I think we often come back to that, whether it's self-esteem or some of the products of self-esteem, like certainty and confidence. And, just to go back through my own timeline, very similar to yours, and I know you adopted a lot of the things that I had implemented for better and worse along the way. And, I came from the world of, Reggie Gold and listening to Reggie and listening to tapes and Joe Strauss and Box on the Wall and all of those things. And obviously I resonated with the third paradigm model, but it was the business model that I tied to it that, in retrospect was a really terrible idea. And I remember lots of different phases. And again, it all was prompted out of the wrong place. People weren't staying. The practice wasn't growing. I was new. I was paying a lot of money. I had no idea what I was doing.
Wait. You think that's the wrong place? I think that's the exact right place for these things to start, coming from.
Well, let me reframe it, Horatio, saying
Sure.
I was making the decision based on, oh my God, I get it. I have to do something different. But instead of going out and actually seeking out good advice, I thought, Reggie does this. Now, granted, I'm listening to these tapes in 2001, 2002, 2003, when these tapes were from 1980 and 1985. And yeah, so again, the things had changed. And, I'm obviously a major fan of Reggie Gold for his chiropractic contributions and, all of those components. But from a business side, it just didn't work. And I would try all kinds of different things. I did, you could do a box on the wall, but I did you choose your own fee. And then I did, I did the one where you had to come to an orientation first, which that I don't have a problem with. I had to come to orientation, but they had to bring a guest. And if we were going to start, they had to be on an annual fee. And if they were going to be on an annual fee, then they had to have 1 referral a month. Of course, I had no way of tracking that, no way of holding people accountable to that. And, it was just interesting to see how each of those failed for many different reasons. And for me, what happened was I reached this point, and it was actually not until probably 2008, maybe just pre-Life by Design. And what happened was, in making the day 2 agreements with people and talking about handling objections, I was just becoming frustrated with the lack of agreements, the poor quality of agreements, or just, not knowing what to even talk about with this person when they would say certain things to me or when they would have an objection, or people telling me that they are in agreement and then not following through. And those things were really frustrating to me. So I hit this point where even though I couldn't really at the time probably afford to let a lot of people go, still probably hovering around 100 visit a week practice at that time, 120 visits a week. And of course, those on much lower family oriented fees and that type of structure. So, not collecting a whole ton of money at the time. And I made this decision where, here I am. And at that point, 6 years into practice, I guess it was, or 5 years into practice. And I'm not as successful as I wanted to be from a financial perspective and practice growth perspective. What the hell do I have to lose? And I was, what is the point of all this? Why am I inchworming myself from 120 to 121 visits to 122 visits to 119 and back and forth? And when really what I should be doing is making a decision as to what's okay with me and what's not. And then just being okay with the outcome, which is really, I think, a great principle for life in general. Identify what you're about, identify your values, define what you're doing and where you're going, and then make it clear to other people that's what's happening. If they want to get on board, that's great. Now, here's where I didn't quite have it. If they don't, that's great too, right? If they don't, that's okay. But at the time, my first transition into this line of sand was, oh, you don't want to start? Well, as I said before, who's going to correct your subluxations? It was very much a confrontational position. And we recognize, both of us and everybody listening, that you're better off not subluxated. I get that. You're also better off training. You're also better off eating a whole food diet and so on and so forth. And, just because people don't do that doesn't mean that I have to reprimand them or banish them from my life, as a general principle. But it is okay to draw a line in the sand. It is okay to decide what's good with you and what you're about, and then start to create your infrastructure around that.
Yeah, I can't disagree. The only thing that I would add to that is be careful, when you're deciding what you want. That's part of the equation. The other part of the equation, and much often less talked about, is what your market will bear. Like, there's certain expectations. This is 2018. There are certain expectations that your community has that you better figure out very quickly of A, what they're looking for in a doctor, and B, what their expectations are when they come to a doctor. And these are not things that you should be romantic about. I understand that you want everybody to come for a year. I understand that you want everyone as lifetime practice members. I understand what you want. However, is that going to be compatible with what your market expects?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Cratio, and I think those two have to blend together. And now you could have that, everybody starts for a year, everybody brings a spouse, if you're in a large enough market where that exists, and the market will bear that. And the reason I know that is because there's lots of practices that have successful growth and profits who have that 100%. Type of practice. 100%. Now, if you were to take, say, that approach and put it in a market like mine, as an example, it probably would have a difficult time being as successful because my market may not bear that. And this was a whole conversation in our training facility today during our coaches meeting is I get what is ideal from a coaching perspective. I get what is the best training program. I get all that. But at the same time, there's certain things the market wants, and there's not enough people who want exactly identically what we have in store. So we need to figure out how can we blend other things that the market wants without compromising your values. And I think that's the challenging part as you're figuring this out.
Yeah, but think about it, right? Like if you went to go see somebody, Jamie, and they said, perfect, I need you and Dana to come here, and you need to find a babysitter, and you need to do all this stuff. I mean, you could respect where they're coming from, but that might be a hard enough challenge to make happen that you would consider going somewhere else, possibly. Just saying it.
Sure, that's right, and that might be a disqualifier. And this is all the precursor type of things that you need to have in place when we're talking about handling objections. And I know, originally this is a handling objections podcast, but as I kept paring it back and paring it back and paring it back, what I realized is that, other than time, and I've seen docs go through all these different objections, I find it either comes down to time and actual legitimate scheduling issues, or maybe they don't live in town, live far away, all those types of things. I think those are legitimate. Honestly, I rarely see money as an issue. And not to say that money isn't an issue in terms of, hey, a person doesn't have enough money or sometimes, they don't value it. Yeah, I get all that. But what I'm saying is it's rarely the issue because if you can't afford me, then it's not an issue. You know what I mean? It's not an issue on my side because here's my fee. And if you can't afford my fee, well, then we don't work together. So, right. It's funny that the money issue comes down to handling objections with, what would your spouse want you to do? Would they want you to do things that are good for you? Well, isn't it worth it? Or going through their finances with them and all that stuff. And honestly, I don't do any of that. I just can't do it. and maybe that's me, and that's my line of understanding, it's too annoying to me. I built incredible amounts of value through my day 1 and day 2 process. The Life by Design Center built incredible amounts of value. They're pre-qualified. By the time I get here and I've identified your core problem and I've clarified that to you and described that to you and explained and we've connected on how that's affecting your life, if you can't afford my fee, we don't work together. So from an objective standpoint, or an objection, I should say, standpoint, I really just think it comes down to time and frequencies. And so because of that, that's where this line in the sand ratio is the most important part. You have to make a decision as to what your process is. And we talked about this on a previous podcast when we discussed the idea of your core product. And that's the big change that we've really made over the last few years is, what's my core product? If I could just be okay with accepting people into care to complete the core product and not worry about building lifetime practice members. Because statistically, if I complete my core product with you, 92% of you become basically a lifetime practice member anyway. So why do I need to focus on it? There's already a trigger there that works. It doesn't need extra attention. I need to focus my attention on, can you complete this core product? And the only possible objections there are, if I start you off, let's say at 3 checkups a week for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 or 12 weeks, depending on where you're falling in your testing, and you say, I can't make 3 times a week and there's a legitimate scheduling issue, am I okay with you coming twice a week for a longer period of time? That's pretty much the only question that I see in terms of handling objections at the day 2.
One of the things that I would like to add, and this has been a focus for me lately, and I found it to be very helpful, if they show up on day 2 and for the first time you're having the conversation about length of time, and haven't handled the potential, because they're already thinking in their mind before they even walk into your office, how long is this going to take and approximately how much this is going to cost. So I mean, from experience, I know that it's not a good idea to start introducing that conversation on the second visit. You're better off giving them an idea of how long and how much and how frequent right from the beginning.
Yeah, I think that can work for sure. I would actually say for the majority of people, that's a great strategy. For sure. And I know I had done that for years, Gracio, on day 1, when I would get to the end and explain the different grading system that we use in the practice, and that based on the quality and quantity of your problem, it could take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, a few $100s to a few $1,000s. And that's typically, and that's all you have to say. Yeah, absolutely. It gives them a good range. Of course, keeps them curious because they don't know. You have to obviously go through the testing procedures and protocols. And the reason, back to the objection, the reason we want you to draw that line. So I don't really care what it is. And that's what I was saying. Is it 3 visits? Is it 10 weeks? Is it a year? It doesn't matter. You need to decide for yourself based on your values, based on what your market will bear, wrap that up in a core product. And I'm saying whatever that is, that's what it is. So I can tell you in our practice, and obviously that's all I can speak for, our corrective care phase is 16 weeks. Now, the frequencies vary drastically based on what the test results look like. And that's the same for an infant as it is for an adult. So an infant might have, a lower frequency of 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 checkups, or maybe more over the course of 16 weeks, whereas an adult might have 16 to 46 checkups over a 16-week period. Again, depending on what the test results demonstrate. But here's the point. When we go through their problem and we get them to see that a core problem exists, that it's not going to get better if they don't do anything about it, obviously, that it's important enough for them to take the time to do it, then we'll go ahead and we'll walk them through that process. I won't accept somebody into the process unless they complete that process from start to finish. And what that means is I know that I can get XYZ result objectively if you were to complete this. And if you can't do it, don't start. Right? Don't start because, one, you're going to be wasting your money, first of all. You're going to waste your time. You're not going to get the result you want. And, it's going to affect my reputation. And if you're newer in practice or your self-esteem is still not strong, it could ultimately affect your self-esteem in a serious and negative way because you're going to accept people that are going to drop out. You need to accept people who want to go through your process. I'm not saying you make it so it's, so extreme that everybody's going to be disqualified. You got to make it reasonable for your market and tie that in with what you're going to need to do to get the result. But at the end of the day, your process is your process. You're the doctor. You define the outcomes. It's your reputation. It's your results for them. And of course, it's your self-esteem that I'm most concerned about.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. That's great. I mean, that's your process. I think that's the whole point. That's exactly what you're saying. You need to be clear on what you're good with, where you're not good with, and where that line is.
Yeah, I think that really is the point of today's episode, guys, is figure out what it is you do and what you're trying to create, what it is you're trying to have as your outcome, know what your market will bear, create that, define that, have a testing protocol and procedures to figure out where people are in terms of a grading scale, set your frequencies equal to that, have pre-testing, post-testing, and really create a logical, objective system for people that can make sense. If you do that, I can tell you, it doesn't take a lot for people to go from, I just came in to get my lower back fixed to, hey, I think this is something I really want to do right now or in the future. And, this makes a lot of sense to me. So that's my suggestion. Do those things. Make sure as you check out something really exciting, and that is the chiropractic sales playbook. I know sales has a weird connotation for a lot of people, but we threw it in here in today's episode as something to check out because we did this almost a year ago now, Creatio, and we turned it into a really strong, exciting module system where if you do want to know how to handle some of the actual objections as well as the whole other sales process, it's really just getting people to make an agreement to something that is good for them and it's good for you as a positive outcome. You want to do that, you want to do it in a way that's really, I think, authentic and legitimate and honest, then go ahead and check that out. It's in the show notes, guys. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Creatio, thank you for coming on the show again.
As always.
And thank you guys for joining A Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.